We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
Encara Messi, 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 gol, 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 gol.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it.
I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
This is the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast with Gary Curneen.
Hello, welcome to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. My name is Gary Curneen. Joining me for this episode is Peter Ramage. Peter has played at Newcastle United in the Premier League for 4 years. He's also played at QPR, Crystal Palace, Birmingham, had spells in India and in the US with Phoenix Rising, where he is now an assistant coach. So this is part of the Coaching Corner series, where we take one aspect of the game, look specifically at it into depth and detail for 30 minutes max. It's part of the promotion for my new book, Coaching Your 4-3-3, which is designed to challenge coaches to take a closer look at their own beliefs on the game and then structure their system alongside that and the qualities of their players. We talk a lot about things like creativity, decision-making, risk-taking with regards to our players, but I believe they should apply to coaches as well. So there's plenty of sessions, ideas, and I also share my own personal experience on aspects of the game that I've come across and been inspired by over the past 5 years. The book is available now on modernsoccercoach.com. It ships worldwide, and we have fast delivery in the United States and the UK as well. So would love to hear what you think about it, and thanks to everyone who has ordered it already. It should be arriving in the next day or two. So for this one with Peter, our subject is central defending. So we talk about Peter's background in the game, what inspired him to be a centre-back, and then the work that went into Newcastle United's academy in that area, what went into the individual work as well. We talk about playing in the Premier League, what did that require more of from a defensive aspect. We also compare the US to England, and then of course we talk about coaching, what he believes in, where areas that he wants to strengthen, areas that he thinks youth coaches should be strengthening from centre-back. So really enjoyed this here. Peter's different class and he's so passionate about this area of the game. I think you're going to get an awful lot from it. So as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts at Gary Curneen on Twitter, also on Instagram at Gary Curneen as well. Let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Here's Peter. Enjoy. Peter, thanks so much for joining me today for the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. Excited to have you on.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Wanted to talk about central defending and back fours. Obviously, as an Irishman, when someone says central defender and back four, I think of the physicality of it.
Yeah.
How much of your approach or how much of your education growing up was your dad had a background in rugby? Did you hear "Don't be soft" throughout your childhood years ringing?
Yeah, it was kind of like that. I came through the kind of the old school where we were, or the end of the old school, really, I suppose you could say, where you had to be big, strong, and tend to be ugly centre offs. It was one of those molds. My dad really didn't really push me into the rugby side of things. It was all football, and I was always I went into Newcastle as a centre forward, and I literally had to learn my education as I was going on. So to become a centre off, I didn't have any knowledge of it when I went into the game. And then, as the years went on, you start to realise that you do have to be a little bit bigger, you do have to be a little bit stronger. But what I found was that, because I basically played as a centre forward all my childhood career, I kind of had a little bit of knowledge on centre forwards. So you kind of observe runs, observe what they're doing. And so whilst I was trying to work on that, as a big component of my game was trying to get bigger and stronger, it wasn't probably my strongest attribute. It was more reading of the game, which now we're seeing centre offs, the likes of John Stones, and I'm looking at the Porter of Man City, just using them as an example. I wouldn't class them as big physical centre offs, likes of Vincent Kompany, who's seems to be slowly transitioned out of the City starting lineup, and replaced by guys who are technically gifted and and to use a term, they're actually footballers and not centre-halves.
Going into that Newcastle Academy, you worked with Alan Irvine, who's got
Yeah.
really, really good reputation. Curious how much of his work with you was intentional with the back four, or were there certain principles that were ingrained with you at that early age?
Yeah, I mean, he was still, for me, the best footballing coach I've ever worked with. His attention to detail on every aspect from a team and an individual point of view. I mean, we were under 17s and under 19s when I was working with him, so it was, kind of a throwback to it was an education, and he made sure that each and every single one of us got that. And so, from a defending point of view, we used to have individual days where he would, work with our units. It usually, generally, was a Tuesday afternoon, and he normally took the midfielders and the attackers. Is that what he was? And we had Kenny Wharton back then, who was, the under-19s coach, but a defender himself. But when Alan was, coaching us as a team, it was defend first, never play a square pass. But he really was big on us trying to play. His mantra was that I'm not producing a centre-half, I'm producing a footballer to try and have a career in the game. There was one lad who I played with, who you might know, Bradley Orr, was a centre midfield player coming through the ranks at Newcastle United, but made his career at Bristol City, at QPR and Blackburn as a right back. And that was because of the education that we got and Brad got. He was able to play in a number of positions. And that was down to the attention to detail of Alan Irvine. And he's trying to produce footballers who could, play in any position, because at the end of the day, we're not all going to come through the ranks at Newcastle United or Manchester United or Man City. Guys are going to leave and go elsewhere. So he did try and, work individually on a position specific. He was very much trying to produce footballers too.
Did you supplement that work with gym work as well and get?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was again, we had days where we were doing double sessions. In fact, almost every day was a double session. Even on, I think maybe just a Friday before the game. The day before the game was the only day where we didn't really do double sessions. But yeah, was fitness based. But again, it wasn't just going in and lifting. To use a term over here, like American football, to become like American footballers, or rugby players. It was, again, position specific. Like for me, yes, sometimes it was days where I was, trying to lift a barn door and things like that. But then there was other days when I was trying to work on my agility, because, you come up against a big or a small nippy centre forward. Sometimes brute strength isn't the way forward to combat that. You have to be able to kind of defend properly. So fitness was a big component of it, but again, it wasn't just gym work. It was, there was other different parts to it that enabled us to be at our maximum or optimum levels when it came to game day.
Fascinated by the environment in England, those academies, because of you've almost got a role model built in. Newcastle, not necessarily known for their centre backs, more their number nines. Was there someone in the senior team that you latched onto and looked to learn from?
Yeah, I mean, there was 3 guys for me who I looked up to. One guy who Irish boy, Aaron Hughes. He was best mates with a lad who I grew up with, so I kind of knew him. But I seen myself in him in a way that he was versatile. He played right back, left back, centre half. I mean, Bobby Robson even played him in the middle of the park. But what stood out for me was that he was schooled into being a footballer. That, again, like I said about Alan Irvine, he was a footballer that was able to play in a number of positions. So as I was coming through the ranks at Newcastle, I would find myself going down a similar path where, there was games where I was playing right back. There was games where I was playing, left side of a 3 at the back. There was games where I was playing, I wasn't getting pigeonholed into a position, and I kind of watched and learned from Aaron because of that. He was a brilliant role model for me, and above it all, he was a great guy off the pitch. He was always there when, even in the academy, he was always there to speak to you and give you advice. And then when I went into the first team, he was one of the first people to kind of take me under his wing. And then the two others were the Caldwell brothers, Gary and Stevie, who I just thought were unbelievable defenders. You know, throwbacks, two proper centre-offs, but both could play as well. I mean, both were great on the ball, but Gary I thought was a little bit better. But Stevie, again, broke through the first team. And for us, academy players, it was great to see at that time. The likes of Stevie coming through and going in and playing a number of games in the first team. Gary going, you know, unfortunately didn't work for him at Newcastle, but he left and went to Hibs and then went to Celtic and ended up playing in the Champions League and captaining his country and things like that. So for us, and for me personally, to see guys who I've worked with on a daily basis go through in the system and then become professional footballers at the top level, you know, they were guys for me above the superstars that you know that were in the game at the time, because I felt there was a bit of a bond between the three of us there.
Going back to the physicality piece, looking at your playing and who you played for, it got me thinking, does the manager that you play for help drive home aggressiveness or competitiveness simply by the way they view the game or what they value? And looking particularly at Graham Souness.
Yeah, I mean, so that was the thing. I came through as a centre-half, but then made my debut at right-back and played predominantly all my games with Graham Souness at right-back. And he wanted me to be able to have the athleticism to go up and down the park more than the physicality, because in front of me was Norberto Solano, who was probably one of the best players I've ever played with, but couldn't run. You know, give him the ball at his feet and he could put it wherever you wanted. So his big component for me was athleticism and endurance. So I had to, you know, learn a different part of the game in respects that I had to become a wing back almost and be able to attack when Nobby came inside, but also when Nobby gave the ball away, I had to get my backside back and back into position at right back. So the physicality side of things kind of changed. And then, you know, when he left and Glenn Roeder took over, I moved sort of more inside to play centre off with Stephen Taylor, and then I had to get back into the gym and start to bulk up a little bit more, because I was coming up against the likes of Marlon Harewood and centre forwards of that ilk, big, strong, physical players who, you know, I needed to learn to toughen up, and it was a hard lesson for me to learn, because I'd you know, kind of gone down one sort of fitness channel, and then all of a sudden I'm getting, you know, sent on another detour, and I had to do it, and I had to do it quickly if I was to, you know, stay in the first team. And, you know, unfortunately I did, but then, you know, I moved on, and then that was another story.
Your first start for Newcastle, correct me if I'm wrong here, was against United, that Wayne Rooney volley?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. That was an incredible turn of events, because we literally had an injury crisis, but all the way during the week, I wasn't in the side. You know, Graham Souness was trying a couple of different things. You know, I was still a young kid, and we're going to Old Trafford, so you don't want to get a hiding or anything like that. So it ended up Stephen Carr playing in the middle of the park as like a holding six, and me playing at right back against Ryan Giggs, and it was a daunting challenge. But you know, I was on a hiding to nothing in a way. If we got, and the team were as well, we were on an injury crisis, and we got battered. Then it was because of all the injuries. The excuses were there for us, but you know, Darren Ambrose scored early doors, I think it was, and you know, we kind of held on for a bit until, you know, I'd done what Alan Irvine told me never to do as a defender and headed back in towards play, headed out. I headed it back in, and you know, Wayne Rooney scored that unbelievable volley, which, you know, if you probably put it in front of him, well, in fact, Wayne Rooney would probably stick it in probably 5 or 6 times out of 10. You know, you're saying he would never won that one 100, but it fell to the one guy it didn't want it to fall to on the pitch, and the rest is history, as they say.
Making the step up then to the Premier League, what was the most difficult challenges? Was it in the physical end, technical end, mentally, tactically?
I would probably say the mental side of things, because it was the first time that was kind of like, well, the mental in terms of the mental and technical and tactical, because you make a mistake and you get punished. You know, I think to the next season, in fact, we went to Old Trafford, and I played a back pass and put Wayne Rooney through on goal against Shearer, and we got beat 2-0. And it was a massive learning curve for me. Was that mistakes you can't get away with them at that level. You get punished, and then the mental side of things was trying not to let mistakes happen, affect you, I should say. Because in fact, it was funny because I'd done that, put Wayne Rooney through on goal. It was the same day that Steven Gerrard done the same thing at Arsenal and put Thierry Henry. So it was exactly the same day, and we're on the bus on the way back from the game and watching it, and you know, it kind of gave me a little bit of a confidence boost in regard that, you know, I'm watching a guy who's arguably one of the best midfield players that's ever graced the Premier League do exactly the same as a young 21-year-old kid. So, and I had to learn a hard lesson that, you know, I can't let these, you know, affect me. It was the start of the time when, you know, kind of social media was coming into play and things like that. And I was reading a lot of things about, Ramage is one of the worst players I've seen in a black and white jersey, you know, this and that, as every player, you know, probably sees it. And it hit me hard as well, reading comments like that. And I had to learn again, but this is when, like, my dad got a hold of me from a rugby standpoint. And, you know, I spoke to a few rugby players about that kind of thing. And, you know, if it doesn't, it can't let it affect me. And that was the big learning curve going into the Premier League was, you know, you're opening yourself up to 1,000,001 people or 1,000,001 managers who have all got an opinion on you, and the only opinion that really counts is that of firstly of your manager and then secondly of, you know, like yourself and your family.
Yeah, when you pinpoint the side of the game, so say something like focus or discipline or tactical discipline or concentration, when you pinpoint that there and say I need to improve it, how do you do that?
It's a tough question because I think it's only you only learn from your mistakes, or you only learn from your experiences of doing that. You know, I just try to stay focused in games. One of my biggest attributes was my communication, and I found that to be a big tool in me staying in the game because, you know, at centre off, you can sometimes, if things are all going well, you can become a bystander. And you can be watching things going on, and, you know, these wonderful players in front of you are scoring goals and you're not really involved, or they could be missing chance upon chance and the game's close and that one counter-attack and you've got to do your job. So I found, you know, and again, it comes down to watching the Gary and Stevie Caldwell, that one of their biggest attributes for me was their communication skills and organising people around you. So you didn't have to do the work. It was the players that were in front of you that were doing it. So staying concentrated in that respect in terms of, you know, organisation was a big thing for me and a big thing that I took on the rest of my career and I tell now my players, my centre-halves, is that, you know, when I come in and we get the stats, the physical stats and things like that, I want to be seeing that you've done the less distance, you've had the least amount of touches on the ball, and you've hardly had any aerial challenges or things like that, all because you've been concentrated in the game and organising those that are in front of you.
On the communication theme then, between 2012, 2016, you played with a number of different clubs. Do you think communication is down to, you know, you take responsibility for it, or how much of it has got to do with the relationship, being comfortable with people you're around?
There is that, but it was one of the reasons why managers were bringing me in, because maybe not because I was as technically gifted as some other centre or whatever, but because I could organise things, and I found that managers were almost leaning on me to become. I like to think of myself as a leader, and I think that's, you know, when we go into, and it's something that we're doing here at Phoenix, we're trying to build like a leadership group within the players, and I was always one of the first to be asked to do so, just purely because with all due respect, I didn't care for reputations. I didn't care for what you'd done in the previous. I'm there to try and better myself and better the team. And if that meant I had to call a spade, I wasn't going to call it a spoon. You know what I mean? I was going to tell it as it is. And I think that's one of the reasons why I, you know, for somebody that wasn't the most technically gifted, but I had a career in the game because I was able to do that.
Staying on communication, when you're in those stadiums, and obviously when we're watching Premier League games, we don't have access to who's making what noise or how much that noise matters. Was it something that you were aware of whenever you played against bigger teams? You know, the other players, the Rio Ferdinands that era, was their communication high as well?
Yeah, I mean, my career path kind of went the other way. I was going into smaller and smaller stadiums, so all they hear was a big boom and Geordie voice. So it was a lot easier to shout and ball. But no, I mean, like when I went back to Newcastle and done a bit of work, in the academy, and I was fortunate enough to work with the 23s, and I'm getting access to the first team and watching, training. A big component I found of like Sir Jamal Lascelles and Kieran Clark. Watching them guys train, you could hear them on the training pitch 3 pitches away, and that's probably because they needed to learn to use their voice because they're playing in front of 52,000 people week in, week out. And at the top level, I watch the game now, and you see, although you obviously can't hear, you can see, you can kind of pick up traits. Yourself when you're watching the game and you're ready, and what to look for. You can work and you can see that centre-halves are organising in front of them and they're getting the players in the positions that they need to be able to, like I said before, not to be able to do any work themselves. So, and when I go to obviously Premier League, well, when I go to watch Newcastle and you watch the opposition, you can see that. You can see the centre-halves organising, the goalkeepers getting the players in front of them all organised. And it's great to see because I think that's, for me, it's centre-half. That's one of the biggest things, especially now that, you're asking for players to be able to play out from the back. You've got to be able to play out from the back, but when you lose the ball in transition, you've got to be able to get people in positions to be able to defend, and I think that's also a good thing too.
How important was playing against players like Shearer in training and getting exposed to that level of competition during the week, or even with Drogba and Phoenix now? Do you see the young players benefiting from that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, Didier going back to Al, he was brilliant. He trained, or he played how he trained, or he trained how he played, sorry, I should say. He was, I was a young kid coming up and, I wasn't taking it easy, but I wasn't going into challenges. Yourself, sometimes you pull out of things. And he pulled me at one side and said, "Don't ever do that to me again." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Don't ever pull out of a tackle again." He says, "Because if you pull out of a tackle, I might be able to. I don't work my touch as hard as I have to do when I've got Nemanja Vidic or Tony Adams, coming up, firing through the back of him on Saturday." So he was big on that, and that was my first real experience of training like that, at that kind of intensity. And then I fast forward sort of 15 years on, and Didier Drogba's still doing the same, still demanding the same. From the young kids that we've had at Phoenix, he's demanding, the expectations of a Premier League star, an international quality star, in training, never mind in games. And it's great, and I loved it, and that's how I was brought up from Alan Irvine, and obviously Alan had a bit of a relationship with Alan too, from their Blackburn connection. So it was good to be exposed to that and learn that every day you're learning, and every day you've got to try and take something away from a training session, and that was a big thing that I've learned 15 years from the first time that I was exposed to it.
How different is defending in the US than it is in England?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, there's not, with all due respect over here, there's not the quality of forwards. You might get 2 or 3 chances to your one in England. The defending it's a big part of the thing. It's for us and for me. These guys, I'm trying to get these guys up to the highest level they can possibly be. Now that might be where they are now at the USL. So I'm trying to give them the best opportunity to have a career. In defending is a big part of winning over here. You look at, we're trying to put some stats together for the guys coming in for next season, and we kept joint highest amount of clean sheets last season. But the games that we conceded, if you take sort of them clean sheets away, on average, the games that we conceded were almost 2 goals a game. So, that's something that we're trying to rectify. And because if we don't keep clean sheets, then we seem to be conceding bucket loads of goals. So it's something that we need to learn to improve. And it's a big thing in America. And I think, it's not just defending, but I think it's the system that the US has, that a lot of college or pre-college football players, get an education, then go to the college system for 4 years. So then when they come back into the program, they're 21, 22, 23-year-old. Well, some guys over in England have played 200-300 games by then. He looks at like the Raheem Sterling. I think I've seen a stat, or Wilfred Zaha has played 300 games for Palace, and he's 25 or something like that. Well, 25-year-old American defenders haven't played 300 games, by the time they're 25. So it's, like I said, to be able to give them that education, not from a defensive standpoint, but from an overall, I think it's going to be key to the US going forward.
I was talking to a coach last week, and he was moaning about coaches making defensive exercises too easy, defending sessions too easy for the defenders. How do you like to challenge your back four in trainings?
I used to love it, to be honest with you. It was, whilst everybody was trying to do, crossing and shooting, I was the one asking to go in and defending. I wanted to excuse the French, but I wanted to piss the forwards off. I didn't want them to score. I wanted to keep clean sheets. I was always brought up in that, and I often try to, work forwards and then work back. I kind of like doing the old whole part whole, kind of working the back four, then going into individual stuff, and then going back into a back four, and it's always with kind of an overload. So you're really tested. But I mean, it's different, because when I was at Newcastle, you're working with kids, so you kind of have to break things down on an individual basis. We'll come over here, and it's kind of senior football, and Rick's like the manager. He loves goals, he loves attacking, flowing football, and he's always shoving overloads against like 4v2s or 5v3s or 6v whatever. It's always an overload, but I love that for our defenders, because it's getting challenged, and it's about the guys being able to cope with that kind of thing. So when you are got 3 and 4, you're all 4v4 or 5v5 or 6v6, that it kind of becomes easy. And for me as well, again, going back to the communication side of things, it works on that. It works on, you're demanding that extra yard from your other centre off to go and defend or block the shot or stop the cross. The goalkeeper being a massive component in that, helping the 3 that's, overloaded in front of them to be, to give him the best opportunity to make a save. So again, I've never been a fan of making it easy for the defenders. I often think it should try and make it easy for the attackers, so the defenders work harder.
What's your thoughts on heading? How important is it in today's game?
I think it's massive. I watch. Now you look at the stat of set piece goals, and how vital they have becoming in games. And is that because we've gone away from the old fashioned, again, use the likes of Tony Adams and Nemanja Vidic, who just used to love sticking their head on the end of things, whether it be defending, attacking. They just love to head the ball, and I did too. And I think it's a massive thing that we need to kind of bring back into the game. But I also see, it's not just heading away. Can we, for me, I'm looking at my defenders, if, from a long goal kick, can we make the header pass? So I'm actually not just heading it back into play or whatever. I'm actually trying to find somebody with your head. So I think it's a vital part of the game that we need to bring back and work on. And I'm trying to do so with my defenders, is that, yes, there's a time for heading with height and distance, to quote an old phrase, but I'm also looking, can I cushion one down to my left back to be able to play out and start an attack?
Particularly as teams counter pressing such a big thing now, because you've got to not only win the ball in the air, but you've got to beat the counter press, the next ball that's coming in, because you don't want to defend the next ball twice, right?
Correct. I mean, you watch like, I'm a massive fan of Man City at the minute, just not obviously because they're winning everything, but because of the way they play, and a big part of that is because of the way Edison uses the ball at his feet. And we're clipping up stuff for our team, and I'm watching Edison playing 60-yard passes, and putting people through, like the one the other day for Mahrez when he came on. Now, for me as a defender, as that ball's going over my head, I'm not just trying to head it. Can I get myself in a position? Because, like you said, to try and beat the first press to so we can then counter their counter, so to speak. And it's not just heading height and distance. Is it, can I head my ball back to the recovering midfield player, or head it back over the forward to the recovering fullback to begin a counter-attack ourselves. And I think that's where we kind of lose sight of being able to head the ball properly.
Last one for you. The defender of tomorrow, you've got an under-12 coach, who wants to develop players, and we all want to develop the Messi, but it might be worthwhile invest a bit more time in a back four. Where would you say, because everyone, people look for different things, strength, speed, decision making. Where would you say that the youth coach should be looking at?
Again, I go back to it. I think personally, it's trying to produce a footballer. The 12-year-old, just producing them to be able to play 12-year-old at centre half, but then 14 at centre forward or left wing. I'm I want my defenders to be able to play. We're big on trying to play out from the back. So, and again, I go back to the Man City mantra. I watch them, and you got players interchanging in different positions. The way their rotation from, defence to midfield players. You've got guys being able to, Fabian Delph. 1 week he's playing left back, the next week he's playing centre midfield player, and that's what I would like my under 12 to be. Phoenix Rising are starting to get or are looking into the youth side of things. We're coupling up with a youth program in here, and we're going out for a meeting with them tomorrow, and that's going to be our big kind of topic, that you're not just producing centre halves, right backs, left backs. You're producing footballers, and that's, for me, as a youth coach, is what we need to, or we should be trying to produce. And I think the better football players you produce is going to be, down the line, you're going to have better teams.
Quality. And then the bonus question: best centre forward you came up against?
I got asked this the other day. Actually, it was funny enough, and probably one of the best is, for a number of reasons. Well, there's two that have come up against is Thierry Henry at Arsenal. I'm fortunate to play against him on 2 occasions, and he was just absolutely electrifying in so many different ways. Big, strong, powerful, good in the air, good with both feet. I played against him when I was at right back, and then I played against him when I was at left back, and both times he really gave me one of my biggest tests. And the other one was Wayne Rooney. Kind of similar in terms of pace and power, but a different kind of centre forward. But them two were the two standouts for me, and probably the two two of the modern era anyway, two of the greatest.
Not bad, that Rooney and Thierry Henry.
I know.
Top class. Peter, thanks so much. This was brilliant.
No, thank you for having me, Gary. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much to Peter for his time and his insight there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. A couple of takeaways for me. Firstly, that attention to detail. We talk a lot about it from a coaching point of view and how important it is from a coach, but I think awareness and attention to detail from a player's perspective is just vital in the development phase. And when he said there that, when Graham Souness moved him from one position to the other, he said, I had to do it, and I had to do it quickly if I was to stay in the first team. And I look at development from a player's aspect, and I always think that when they're presented with the feedback, or they're presented with areas that they can improve on, there's never that urgency, or there's rarely that urgency to get better tomorrow. And I think that's so important, that we've got to start communicating to the players that there is a window here where they have to make those progressions in their game. Otherwise, the game moves on and levels move on, and they may not get to where they want to go. So I think it's interesting when you talk to the players who have been on the podcast that have played at the top level, there's always that awareness of where they need to go and what they need to do to get there, and then the willingness and the determination to do that right away, rather than saying, well, in the new year or next season I'm going to get better at this here. And then the other part for me was the communication piece. And it's the other way around again, we usually talk about it from a coaching perspective, but how important it is for players. And the thing that stood out for me was how Peter saw that as an opportunity where he could set himself apart from other players. And he said that managers brought him into their team because of his ability to communicate better. And it is so competitive and so difficult for young players now to break in at these levels. The elite level of everything is so competitive. So maybe instead of coaches saying that, you know, they need to improve their communication, maybe come from a different angle and say, well, if you can get it to better than X, Y, and Z, then there might be an opening from you, and this may be an X factor that gives you an opening that someone else might not get. So I thought that was, again, high level of awareness, and his insight from the decision making and the training side. I really, really enjoyed. So thanks so much to Peter. I thought that was outstanding. Would love to know your thoughts, as always, at Gary Curneen on Twitter, at Gary Curneen on Instagram. Let me know what you enjoyed, what stood out for you, things you agreed with, maybe things you didn't agree with as well. All good. And again, that was part of the coaching corner. So we've got quite a few of these coming up, and they're all part of the launch for my new book, Coaching Your 433, designed to challenge coaches to work around their philosophies and what they are passionate about in the game, rather than just copying a different coach's plans and different coaches' work. And that is available on modernsoccercoach.com. So thanks so much for listening. Have a great week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. For more coaching topics, sessions, and resources, head on over to Coach Curneen on Facebook or visit the website at www.modernsoccercoach.com.